All right, thanks a lot. So good afternoon, everybody, and good day for those that are joining in online. Another beautiful spring day in Ithaca. I think spring has finally sprung. So I have three quick announcements before we get started. First, next week, we're going to have our distinguished speaker in global development, which will take place during this seminar period. So we will not be meeting in this room. We're going to be meeting in 401 Warren Hall, which is just building next door, all the way up to the fourth floor in the far right corner. We'll send some more details on Canvas for those who are taking this class for credit. So we will not be meeting here next week. Please keep that in mind. We'll be meeting in 401 Warren Hall. So that's announcement number one. And number two, we have a group that's going to be joining. That's from Syracuse University. I see they're not yet here. I was going to give out a big shout out to the Humphrey Fellows from Syracuse. They might step in at some point during the talk. And third, I won't be introducing the speaker today. We have a very special friend, good friend of ours, Sarah Giroux, who is the Associate Dean of Academic Affairs and Strategic Programs, a good friend and a professor in global development. She's going to be introducing our speaker today. We're quite excited to have a former Cornell coming back to give a talk, and I'm looking forward to that. And with that, I'll hand over to Sarah.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Ed. Yeah, I am so excited. I have been trying to get Sid back to Cornell for a couple decades now. And we finally did it. So I'm really excited about what he's going to talk about today, because for those of you who know me, I love data. And Sid has spent the past 20 years really thinking deeply about how to make data work to solve problems. So thinking about who's hungry, where they're hungry, and how urgently we need to act. I think that's broadly what his work is all kind of framed around. He's currently head of assessments and targeting for the UN World Food Program located in Rome. So he's thinking about a full ecosystem of different types of analyses, things from food security, from markets, from livelihood to resilience. Like, his team is really looking across lots of different indicators to constantly monitor how is hunger unfolding across the globe. His trajectory has been really interesting. He graduated from here, from our master's program in international ag and rural development in 2003, and then went on to Uganda, then was in Thailand, Burma, Egypt, to Nairobi, and to his current position. One kind of interesting note, he was also part of the small group that designed the IPC, the Integrated Phase Classification System, that is really now the global standard for measuring food insecurity. And so I think that, to me, is why I was so excited to have him here. A lot of time you have data people who are really focused on data. You have policy people who don't really understand the data but are making policy. And I think Sid is a great example of somebody who sits in between that space and understands both the technical issues, but also the very big political realities and challenges. And I think this is a really lovely full circle moment for both Sid and I, because 22 years ago, we were sitting in this audience, myself as an undergrad and him as an MPS student. And he became one of my best friends, during my time as an undergrad. I was so blessed to call him a close, wonderful friend. And I think that's so special about your time here at Cornell. Like, the friendships you're going to make are going to be lifelong, and you're going to work with these people in classes, but you're also going to be, hanging out with them at the Big Red Barn, which maybe we did a little too much, but that's okay. We won't talk about that. But in any case, welcome, Sid. So excited to have you back to Cornell. 2 decades too late, but I think we'll go from there.
Can you hear me? After that introduction, it's all downhill from there. So, while we're waiting to settle down, what a privilege and an honor it is to be here. Thank you so much, all of you. And thank you for those of you who have taken the time out to come here today. A couple of disclaimers before I start the presentation. given the audience here, right, it's so varied, and given the subject matter, and the fact I have about half an hour to 40 minutes, there's way too much to unpack. So I'll be breezing across some concepts. Sarah talked about IPC. I'm not going to bore you to detail about what IPC is, right? I'll talk about it, but it won't be in detail. There'll be other concepts I want to present or I want to talk about. And then in the Q&A, feel free to direct me towards your interests. So if you want more detail on something, happy to take it offline too, right? But for me, the challenge really was, given the breadth and scope of this audience and given the topic at hand, what do I focus on? So if I get something off, feel free to ask me questions. So with that, let me dive in right now. Sorry, one more disclaimer. I work for the UN. I'm going to be using data that's coming out of my work in the UN. But I'm speaking on behalf of the development community too. It's not that other NGOs don't have data. It's not that non-UN actors down in Yemen are not doing something with data and making a difference. So this is just one lens, but it's certainly not the most important. It's not the only one. Hunger, right? So again, especially those in the back, you will see this is the number of food insecure per year in the past 5-6 years. And at first glance, you see, oh, there's been an increase. And then a lot of things happened, right? These are some of the things that happened. Again, COVID, conflict, and so on. And at the end, in December 2025, which is 4 months ago, wow, good news, right? Hunger levels are coming down. The world is getting to be a better place. If you came here for good news, sorry, wrong room. No, it's not because we are making any improvements whatsoever in the fight against hunger. Let me add something to this slide. There we go. This is the data, the number of countries that have been giving us data. Numbers were low because we collected less data. And then as we have gone around, again, we are getting back low. And I'll tell you why in a bit. But it's less information coming across. Therefore, less amount of information to work with. And again, let me add one more dimension to this slide. So hunger is not reducing, it's actually increasing. It's also increasing in severity. This is the worst of the worst when it comes to hunger. I don't know how many of you were aware of this really sad fact, but last year something happened for the first time that in our recorded history. Anybody know what that is? You can shout it out if you think you know. Something happened last year for the first time. 2 famines at the same time, both man-made, both entirely preventable, but happening at the same time. That's never happened before. You've had famines before, all the way back to Irish potato famine, but it's been one-offs. It's never been 2 at the same time. And this, again, this is a subset of these numbers, but the severity has never been worse. This is just a graphic. This is something you all are well aware of. The 318 million, they're spread across here. The usual suspects, we know some of the worst places that are happening. The hunger levels are rising. But also keep an eye out on the gray area. That's where we don't have any data. Now, obviously, we don't expect to collect data on this from, say, Brussels, right? But what about areas here? What about Asia? What about the Americas? We don't have enough information, which is not to say that the problem doesn't exist. But this is just to show you, this is an overview of food insecurity, the numbers. I keep saying data, and data is a catch-all term, and I'm just going to put this up to say that, again, the data that I use encompasses all this. It can be GIS data, maps, satellite data. It can be taken from our own surveys. It can be very, very academic research, which I would say 20% of all our data is about coming from academia. And then our program monitoring and so on. when I say targeting, this really refers to WFP work. You have food. You have enough food for 100 people. There are 1,000 people hungry. Who gets and who does not get? That's your targeting. And why do we need data? Again, I'm going to be very brief here. Really, who is hungry? What are the drivers of hunger? Where do these people live? Sure, we know that there's millions of people hungry and food insecure in Syria. But where in Syria? Which district? Again, given limited resources, which districts would you prioritize? Once you prioritize your districts, you know where you want to go. What are you going to do? Give food, okay? But is that going to cause demand-supply imbalance with local suppliers and markets? What about cash? Development agencies, including the UN, give a lot of cash now, right? But what about cash? Is it going to cause alcoholism? Is cash going to be misused? Things like this. So the data tells us or gives us information that helps us avoid some of these problems and get better. So that was the background in terms of data, in terms of why is data important and the magnitude of hunger. How do we use this data? And this is where I'm going to be very brief. Imagine this as a scale. So all of us here, we are on the green, phase 1. As you get worse, you get all the way down to phase 5. This is where the worst of the worst. This is famine. And of course, when it comes to actions, nothing much to do here to all the way there, right? Why I'm putting this up is the 318 million I talked about basically refers to this and beyond. So phase 3, 4, 5. This is called the IPC, the Integrated Phase Classification on Hunger. So there are 5 phases. The worst is the phase 5. And it's based on data that we bring in under all these sectors, if you will, food consumption, availability, accessibility, and so on. And then they have certain indicators for each. Don't worry about the jargon, but FCS, for example, is food consumption score. Then you have your nutritional weights, which of course you guys know very well, and then cut off from each. So all this data is collated, crunched, analyzed, the indicators are used, and you end up on something. But you don't go back, for example, you don't go back and say, you will not go back and put people under phase 5 because one indicator is off. There's got to be a convergence of many, many indicators across many, many parameters. I'll leave it at that, but of course, very happy to share this gigabytes of information on just this table and the one after. So happy to share more as you wish. But now I come to the, let's say, the interesting part of my presentation. We talked about the data. We talked about how it can, why it's important. We talked about hunger. Very quickly, I'm going to give you a few examples of how it's used. This is an extension of my earlier slide, just to talk about that 1.4 million, the worst off. Where are they? And of course, when you go down to the country, when you go to Yemen, for example, we'll have a breakup of where in Yemen the problems are, or the biggest percentage of the population that's in this phase across. Red, if you can see it from there, the red font is to denote a famine, declaration of famine. There's been 2 last year, unfortunately, and then South Sudan back in the day. How do we use this data? And I'll give you 3 examples, 3 slides, and I'm done. And I'd really like to then get into the interactive part of the presentation or this speech. It doesn't matter what your politics are, right? Our job is to be transparent and neutral and bring out the facts. So when it came to declaring a famine in Gaza, we, and when I talk, I refer not just to myself, but people in the IPC, people in NGOs, we are not here to take sides or even express an opinion on the matter. It's data on food security, or food insecurity as you will, and is it saying something, and can we put that data out in the public platform and defend it? Because it's even worse when you say something and then you find out your theory is full of holes. The last place you want to be standing is here, right? Then you're going to be accused of so many things, which we were, by the way. But our data did stand up. And I say our, I mean the development community. This is not just us. But on different parameters, we could say that once the blockade happened, you really saw things deteriorate. Again, this is not a political statement. This is about hunger. And that's why we could go out, and whether it was Europe, whether it was this country, whether it was China, we could go out and say, this is happening. There's a famine in Gaza. It can be stopped if you remove the blockade and let food enter. And then there was pressure from the humanitarian community and food could come back in. But this is an example of just black and white data, nothing else. You also get questions sometimes. I don't know, showed you South Sudan, but there's a common question that at least I'm asked. WFP, UN, governments are all pumping in money into a country, say Sudan, right? How come things are not getting better? What's happening? And that's where you need data to show them what's happening. This is the percentage of people in Sudan who are in that IPC 345. Basically no change. And forget about this, I'll come to this. Not much of a change, but every year has seen billions and billions of assistance and aid going in. Well, how come there's no change if there's billions and billions, right? And that's because of this part. These are all massive shocks and events. It's okay to place it on a sheet like this, but nothing ends here, right? So you had an economic crisis in 2019, and then COVID hit them. COVID doesn't stop here. You're still seeing the effects. Same way you have flooding, you have climate change change scenarios, and you have conflict. And conflict keeps going up and down. It was there, it's back there. So everything is happening at the same time. When you put it up here, it looks very black and white. Okay, COVID happened here, this flood happened here, boom. But it keeps happening. So if you're a household here, you may have been, I'm not talking about the poorest of the poor. Let's say you were okay, right? As you get hit by each and every shock, by the time you reach 5 years later, your household resilience is eroded. And that's what your data has to show. You have to make a clear case of why more money is needed. Because as a donor, whether it's the government of France or Japan, any country, Bill Gates, the Melinda and Bill Gates Foundation, for example, they're going to be saying, where is it? How come I'm not seeing any change? And this is what you need to. Sometimes you need data to show them the opposite. There is no impact. Sometimes you show data to show the impact. This is an example of a positive side of stuff in Uganda back, I think, 2017. And you can't see it from there, but this entire thing was funded by USAID. Rest in peace. But yeah, it was, we were giving cash, we were giving food, right? You have to show the donor, and this is your money, guys. You have to show the donor that something is working or not working, and what are you going to do about it? Cash at that time, this was, like I said, 10 years ago, there was a lot of questions because we hadn't yet got the methodology right. There were so many questions about money. How are you going to prevent the man of the household not taking that money and doing whatever he wants with it, right? How are you going to ensure, for example, that education, especially among girl children, is going to increase because now you're empowering households to choose what they can do with money. So we had to show all these points. So this is a whole set of work. So you have your program monitoring, which is monitoring data of things on ground. You have to show that your cash is going to the right people. You have to monitor. Then you have, what about the prices? Are you depressing or messing around with local prices because you've come in now with money? So all this stuff goes in. And at the end of the day, you can have, again, all these reports, but especially the end, right? The final has to be out in the open. I cannot pull it back. Even if I don't like the news, I cannot say, well, you know, this one I'm going to keep. It's got to be in the public platform. If you Google any of this, you'll get it. Stuff like that. So this is another way of data. So sometimes you've got to show why there's a problem. Sometimes you show lack of impact. Sometimes you show impact. And that brings me to where we are today, which is not the best place to be. This is across, and I speak for everybody in the development sector per se. Just in WFP, we are down 30% of data. We don't have enough data, and what data we have is rapidly getting older. Can't be used. Why? Two reasons. One is conflict, very self-explanatory. More and more conflict is happening across more and more areas. And governments, I'm not talking about democracies, I'm talking about governments that are not democracies, are not letting us collect data. Again, when I say us, I mean the development community, and certainly WFP. Or they come with qualifiers. You can collect data, but only from the south of the country, not the north. No, forget about the north, is fine. And we're like, no, that doesn't work. Then don't come into our country is what we are told. Or they come in and they go, fine, you can collect all the data you want, but we will write the report. No, you can't do that. So things like this. And then they go, okay, then you don't collect anything. And that's part of the decrease. And this is where we are. Since the past year, there's been, for reasons everybody knows, there's been funding cuts across each and every development actor across the space, whether it's a UN, whether it's a small NGO, whether it was the private sector. Because of this, we don't have enough information. And this is going to be a problem because without data, we can't do these kind of things. And this is also, I mean, for example, you and me could live without this, but imagine something like this happening and you can't raise the red flag because you don't have information. And that's where we are at today. I think I have one more slide. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah. It's just a summary slide of what I just said. This is the worst without data, and it's a real risk. Unfortunately, if you had talked to me 10 years ago, I'd be like, oh, famines come, as you know, doctor, so rarely. And usually when it comes, it's something like there must be 7 to 8 factors happening at the same time to push something into a famine. Not anymore. Now it's become an act of war. It's become a willful action taken. And just, I'm not talking about famine per se, I'm just talking about risk of famine. Right now, even as I speak, my team is actually working on South Sudan, where there's an actual risk. And we're trying to raise the red flag so that we don't get any further into the red. Market dynamics, this is something that I find very worrying because, again, if you see the record, the number of shocks, climatic shocks that have been happening in the past 10 years, and I guess you guys know this better than me, is really been exponentially increasing. Again, it's because we're not able to raise the flag, or if we do, it's very difficult to attribute it only to climatic shock. So it becomes something else. This is what happens again. Something happens, and then the development community, whether it's countries, whether it's the UN, we all rush to get money. But the shock has already happened. The damage is done. Now you're reacting, right? Again, this is the more we do of this, it's throwing money in. We're not going to get bang for the buck. We're not going to make changes. And of course, this gets worse. Like I said, I went through too many concepts. I think I went very fast. Please bear with me. And that ends my part of this. Really looking forward to hearing from all of you.
Thank you very much, Sid, for very succinct and very stimulating.